Hello, welcome to this evening's event. Tonight we'll be reviewing the proposal for Westborough to adopt the Specialized Energy Code. This is a hybrid meeting, recorded and broadcast by Westborough TV. The recording will be posted on Westborough TV YouTube channel, and a link will be posted on the Sustainable Westborough website. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Pete Dunbeck from Sustainable Westborough, and I'd like to introduce the speakers for tonight. First, on your right is Becca Edison. Becca is from DOER. Lisa Cunningham, Cindy Ahrens are from Zero Carbon MA, and Alexander Gard-Murray is remote in the window up above here. And also our support team includes Lila Ahmed. On the far side over here is our Westborough Sustainability Coordinator. Joining us remotely also is Kelly Brown, who's the Green Communities Regional Director, Regional Coordinator for Westborough area. And of course, thank you to Westborough TV for their amazing support on AV and all of our events. We plan to reserve 30 to 45 minutes for Q&A at the end of the talk, so please hold your questions. I'd also like to introduce Jeff Levine, who's a Sustainable Westborough member. He's the vice chair of the committee. And remote is Peter Flynn. He's our chair. He's vacationing in India right now and is connecting to us remotely. So we are here to talk about the Specialized Energy Code and Town Meeting Warrant Article number 27. At town meetings on March 21st, Sustainable Westborough will be proposing that the town changes our bylaws to incorporate the Specialized Energy Code. We are currently on the Stretch Energy Code, which was adopted in 2019. The Specialized Energy Code is a new optional code that was introduced in 2023. The speakers tonight will provide detail on the implications of this change to Westborough and to the environment. If accepted, this change would become effective January of 2027. And an important consideration in this vote is that this affects new construction only. Some of you may be unfamiliar with what an energy code is and the purpose of an energy code, or even that Westborough has one. At a high level, an energy code is a subset of the building code that specifies the energy standards for construction. Becca will be describing more detail how Massachusetts is focused on specific attention on the building envelope and why that was done. The state can also specify the type of energy used or modify the energy efficiency requirements by fuel type, and has done so in these new codes. What's included in the Specialized Code? Simply stated, this applies to new construction, but that begs the question of what is excluded, which are all additions, alterations, and change of use. The guidance document for building inspectors specifically calls out and states that there are no additional requirements for the Specialized Energy Code, that they will be governed by the Stretch Code. So what is going to get changed with the new construction with this new code? As shown on the left side, for most building types, including single-family homes, office buildings, municipal buildings, retail, etc., for these building types, if the building is all electric, there are no changes compared to the Stretch Code. The building type that is not on that list is the multifamily home building, which is I'll address in a minute. The center section addresses if you're not using electricity for heating and it's not an all-electric building, then what is the new requirements? Well, the new requirements are there's solar requirements and pre-wiring for future electrification. In the way the code is written, it refers to mixed fuels because, of course, you have electricity in all houses, and if you add gas or oil or propane, then you're using in a mixed fuel environment. So the mixed fuel buildings will be required to put in some solar and pre-wire for future electrification. And other presenters will be talking about the details of how much solar and what are the implications of pre-wiring. However, it's important to note that recent data on new building construction has shown that it has dramatically shifted to all electric, particularly for commercial construction. Today, significantly less than 10% of the new construction buildings, commercial buildings, use fossil fuel. The large multi-family complexes, such as those proposed in Westborough, that are being proposed to be built in Westborough, are under the commercial code. And these are all planned to use electric heat. Just to be clear, when we're talking about electric heating, we're referring to high-efficiency heat pumps, not the old baseboard resistance heating systems. Multifamily homes in the third column are required to implement a passive house standard. Alexander will be discussing what that means and the impact of passive house on both the developers and the tenants of the building. What I'd like to add is, in regard to the passive house, is recent data from DOER shows that over 80% of multifamily buildings that are being developed are being built to the passive house standard. And in fact, over 60% of multifamily homes, multifamily buildings in the stretch code communities like Westborough are permitting using the passive house standard, and importantly, they're doing it on a voluntary basis. So why are we proposing this? What are the benefits to Westborough? Excuse me. Massachusetts has a goal with these energy codes to support our reduction of greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change. Through our climate action plan, Westborough is committed to do our fair share of these reductions, and this is an important way we can contribute to progress on our greenhouse gas reductions. Adoption of the Specialized Energy Code is a requirement for the Climate Leaders Program, which opens up access to new grant funds that can be used to decarbonize municipal buildings. As a result of this, reduce local taxes that would otherwise be used for this decarbonization work. Inefficient buildings put a heavy burden on the electric grid when they electrify. By building high-efficiency buildings like we're talking about with this new code, electrification can be done with minimal impact on the grid, and Becca's going to discuss this more. Large multifamily buildings built to the passive house standards have lower utility bills for their residents and a healthier work environment. And again, Alexander's going to talk more about the passive house impact. So at this time, I'd like to invite Becca Edson from DOER to come up to the podium and discuss the development of new codes and the specialized code in particular.
Okay. Hi, I'm Becca Edson. I'm an architect. I worked in private practice for many years, primarily residential architecture, until I switched over to the DOER 2 years ago to work mostly on the energy codes. So thank you very much for having me here. So first off, how many energy codes are there in Massachusetts? There are 3 energy codes in Massachusetts. The base code is pretty slim now. Not many communities are left on the base code. That's the one that you're in unless you choose to opt into one of the energy codes that the DOER manages. Our stretch code, which Westborough is on currently, accounts for most of the state, or the largest portion of the state at 60%. The stretch code is, as you know, because you have it, the IECC 2021 with some amendments, some Massachusetts amendments. The specialized code is basically the stretch code plus. And this is an important point to make because we don't want people to think that it's a whole entirely new code that they're going to have to learn, that the building inspectors are going to have to suffer through. It's basically the stretch code with two key appendices, one for residential, one for commercial, that push efficient electrification and passive house. So the specialized code communities are growing. Every town hall season, or every town meeting season, we get more and more communities signed up on the specialized code. It is opt-in, and it's basically pushing us toward our efficient electrification future. Speaking of this future, the state legislature mandated that by 2050 we'll have net zero emissions. This means that we'll be on an all renewable grid. Buildings account for a large chunk of energy use, and space heating and cooling are the reason for most of the building's energy use. So we're not focusing so much on the EUI of the whole building, we're really focusing on the space heating and cooling, especially the peak. We already know that the emissions required to provide space heating are highest when we use gas, and they are lower when we use efficient electrification. So heat pumps already, we know, account for half of the emissions that gas creates. And if we move to this renewable grid by 2050, the emissions created by our all-electric grid will be significantly reduced. So we're moving in the right direction. And the question is, how do we get there, and how do we make sure that our buildings are prepared for this? So we consider the stretch and specialized codes to be thermal codes. Stretch code has set the stage by realizing really quality buildings. We have the 4 pillars, we call them, that are essentially passive house, but we have a quality building envelope, low air infiltration, great ventilation energy recovery so that even though you don't have leaky buildings, you still have clean, fresh air that's been tempered, and reduced thermal bridges. So already stretch code has set the stage for a really quality building that's going to require less heating and cooling. But specialized codes take us to the next level. The specialized code will make sure that new buildings are either all electric already or pre-wired for all electric, so that when we move to this all renewable grid in the future, our buildings are ready, so that when they plug in, we don't break the grid. We're already going to be drawing less energy from the grid with our great buildings, and the specialized code makes sure that we can plug into this grid and be set to go. So it's the next step towards this all renewable future. Some quick facts about the specialized code. Once again, it only affects new buildings. There are no new requirements for all electric homes or EV charging. There are fantastic incentives from the Mass Save program, which Westborough is part of. So there's really great incentive money. Multifamily is required to be passive house, which has tremendous benefits that Alexander will talk about. And it's also important to note that new construction buildings are not required to be all electric under the specialized code. They can choose to be mixed fuel, but if they're mixed fuel, they have to be pre-wired, so that you're not building a new building now and having to dig through the walls in 20 years to make it work on the all renewable grid. So it's basically ensuring that the new buildings we build now are ready for the future. Okay, so I'm going to touch more on the residential code for this talk, but basically this graph is showing what it means to go from being a stretch community to a specialized community. So if you're an all-electric home, there's no change from the stretch code. If you're a mixed fuel home and you're under 4,000 square feet, then you need to provide some solar and wiring for future electrification. If you're a large new home over 4,000 square feet, in addition to what would be required under the stretch code, you also need to provide enough solar so that you're net zero, and you need to wire for future electrification. And once again, passive house is always allowed. And if you did a passive house for a single family home, you just would have to wire for future electrification. Not to emphasize this point too hard, but most of our stock is existing. So if you're doing an existing home alteration or addition, the specialized code appendix does not affect you. You'd still just follow the stretch code. So this change is really just for new construction. Okay, this touches more on the solar required. Once again, if you're an all-electric home, there's no difference in what you'd have to do under the stretch code compared to the specialized code. If you're a mixed fuel home smaller than 4,000, it's 4 kilowatts. And if you're a mixed fuel greater than 4,000 square feet, you'd have to provide enough solar to be net zero. These two slides, these next two slides are showing the cost, that we had some cost studies done for what the lift is to go from stretch code to specialized code. And the great news is that if you're doing an all-electric home, there's no cost difference because you're putting in the wiring. You're doing the same exact thing that you would do under the specialized code as you're doing already under the stretch code. If it's a mixed fuel home, if you want to build a new home and you really want it to have gas or oil, you just have to pay to pre-wire so that when we switch to an all renewable electric grid and we're no longer using fossil fuels, your new home is ready. So you don't have to redo it. And you also have to pay the solar costs. But overall, it's not a huge net difference from building all electric, but there is some more money involved because you're basically putting in your mixed fuel systems and pre-wiring for electric. For commercial code, what does it mean to go from stretch code to specialized code? So once again, if you're all electric, there's no difference. If you're doing an all electric new building, there's no difference in going from stretch to specialized. If you are a municipal building, school, office, and you're doing mixed fuel, so you do have gas or oil, you would do stretch code plus solar, photovoltaic, and wire for electrical. If you're other commercial, you do what you would do under stretch code and pre-wire for electrification and have some solar. And for new multifamily, this is what I think is the best part about specialized code. New multifamily, so that's 4+ stories and over 12,000 square feet, are required to be passive house in specialized code communities, which has tremendous benefits. And I will let Alexander talk about that when he comes up. All right. As always, I will just put a plug in. If you ever have questions about the codes, feel free to reach out to Pete and he can put you in touch with me.
Thank you very much, Becca. Next up will be Lisa Cunningham and Cindy Ahrens from Zero Carbon MA.
That's the slides here. Okay, great. So hi, everybody. My name's Cindy Ahrens. I work a lot with Zero Carbon MA, but I'm also the chair of the Sustainable Lexington Committee in the community of Lexington.
Thank you. And hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Cunningham, the co-founder of Zero Carbon MA, and very happy to be here tonight presenting on the specialized code. So the exciting news is there are now 56 communities who have adopted the specialized code in Massachusetts, representing 32% of the state's population. And this shows a map that's published by DOER, where you can see the spread of the communities. And most of these votes have been overwhelmingly positive votes. They have, towns and cities have run a campaign similar to the one that Westborough is running and educated their community and ended up with incredibly positive votes. This slide just shows a little bit more about what the order of the communities that adopted. This wave of adoption, the specialized code was introduced in December of 2022, along with the updated stretch code. And since January of 2023, when Watertown and Brookline were the first two to adopt the specialized code, you can see that we've had wave after wave of communities adopting the code. So again, this is a little repetitive, but just to emphasize, the specialized code only applies to new construction, not to renovations, addition, or historic buildings. And it facilitates but does not require the electrification of new buildings, as Becca already explained. And then there's also great opportunities for additional state grant funding. Do we have a slide about that? We do, okay, which we'll show later on. So we'll go over that later. And then one of these great opportunities for additional funding, one of them is Mass Save. And another opportunity is that when you adopt the specialized code and a few other measures, you have the opportunity to become a climate leader. And half of the 56 communities that have adopted the specialized code, 28 communities have achieved this climate leader status, which has unlocked grants of up to $1 million for these communities. So there's a significant advantage, economic advantage. There's also other funding opportunities through Mass Save.
So Becca already did a great job of describing what the specialized code does, but we think it's really, in our experience, we think it's really important that people understand how really sort of simple and basic the specialized code is. There's really 4 key parts of it. The first 2 are if you, and the option is still there to continue to build a building with fossil fuel systems, whether that's heating systems, hot water systems, in case of homes, cooking, clothes drying. If you decide to build a new building with fossil fuels, with it's referred to as a mixed fuels, the only thing that you have to do is pre-wire. We talk about pre-wiring for future electrification. What does that mean? It means if you put a gas-fired hot water heater, you have to pre-wire, you have to set up the wiring so that in the future, a heat pump hot water heater or some other type of electric, whatever technology is going to come along, that they can just plug right in. Same thing for your stove. The absolute easiest and cheapest time to do that is when you're constructing the new building. So we view this very much as a consumer protection, a very important consumer protection piece of the specialized code. You are protecting the future tenants and future residents from future costs to fully electrify their buildings. Solar panels, again, if you are building a mixed fuel home or building, you will have to put a minimum amount of solar on. And when we say minimum, I mean, we are advocates, right? This is really not very much solar that you have to put on. But what solar will be put on is really good because it's going to help offset. Again, it's a sort of consumer protection piece because it's going to offset future costs for future residents, future tenants of those buildings. And then for large homes, exemplary performance for large homes, and as Becca stated, we completely agree, really excited about exemplary performance for large multifamily in terms of passive house. The large homes over 4,000 square feet will have to put a little bit extra solar on. It will still be good for those future residents. So this is really, that's all that's in the specialized code. That's all we're asking. This is all that 56 communities have already done, and we hope that Westborough will as well. Lisa mentioned earlier, and Becca as well, lots of, Westborough's a Mass Save community, lots of rebates, especially for for passive house and all electric new construction. Lisa had already talked about the Climate Leaders Program. This is significant money for the town of Westborough, significant money to help decarbonize their buildings and do other sort of decarbonization throughout the town. There is another program called the PACE program that can be used for basically financing some of this work. And if you're a community, there's a lot of communities out there that are thinking about needing new schools, right? If you adopt the specialized code and build your new schools to the specialized code, you will get 3% more money from the MSBA for your school. Significant benefits for the town. And then Alexander will talk about it in just a second, but especially for building of affordable housing, multifamily affordable housing, we all know that we have a housing crisis. We need to build more housing. For affordable housing, there are additional incentives on top of the mass save incentives for building multifamily passive house that really do a lot to offset some of this very small additional costs to building passive house. Oh, I just said all of these things. So one more time, I'm going to review it again. So there will be a test later. I'm just kidding. Number one, we view this as a consumer protection. It's passing the specialized code. You are thinking about the future residents and tenants of the new buildings that you want to welcome to your town of Westborough. Solar, pre-wiring, all of those things, lower costs. There was also, Pete had talked about very highly efficient electric heating with heat pumps. There are new heat pump rates. So you have a lower electricity rate if you heat your building, your home, with heat pumps. Alexander's going to talk about this in a second, but passive house does more than just reduce the cost, reduce your utility bill costs. It creates a comfortable, more resilient, better building, and that's what you want for your future residents here. We talked again about the DOER program, $1 million, potentially $1 million for your town if you become a climate leader, and it will grow, I'm sure, but half of the communities that have adopted the specialized code are already climate leaders and are taking advantage of that great state money. I think that's it. Oh, I got one more thing. Yes, this something is, I'm actually quite excited about. One of the reasons why I'm here tonight. Some people will probably ask, well, putting more codes on, does this slow down housing or stop the housing or make it more expensive? In Lexington, we have passed not only the specialized code, but we are also a fossil fuel-free community. We have also adopted some new zoning for MBTA communities, some for multifamily housing. Since we have adopted that zoning, we have over 1,200 multifamily units in the pipeline. About 400 of them are actually already under construction in 3 different projects. And the other ones are in the process of getting approvals from the planning board, et cetera. 180 of those will be capital A affordable housing, and they're all going to be built to the passive house standard. They're going to be all electric, and so it's just a case in point to show that none of these code options are slowing down building at all. And in fact, I've actually attended some presentations for some of the developments for these projects in Lexington, and the developers themselves put it in their presentation. They're proud. They're like, look, we're going to make a passive house building. This is going to be an all-electric building. Isn't this a great, sort of development for your community? So it will not, our experience is that it is not slowing down development. And there have been a number of studies looking at that, and I think you'll hear more about that too. We're also really, really excited about this one particular project that you see the picture here. It will be 40 units of all affordable housing that's going to be put up in Lexington. It will be built to passive house standards. And because it's built to passive house standards, because the energy demands, the heating demands are so low, The developer has decided that they are going to put solar on and give all of those residents zero costs for their heating and cooling. I mean, it's a really, really great feature. It's really the way that we want to go. So that's my experience from Lexington, and I think now you're going to hear from Alexander more about Passive House.
All right. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yep.
Yeah, I see a nod. Excellent. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexander Gard-Murray. I'm the Executive Director of Passive House, Massachusetts. I'm sorry I can't be with you there today. People have used the word passive house a bunch of times so far, and so I'm here to explain what that means. So passive house is, I think Cindy just used the word exemplary. It's really the gold standard for efficient, affordable buildings that's based on a rigorous control of how air, heat, moisture flows through the building. And that's done with two elements: high performance enclosures, and that's really like the windows, the walls, the doors, making sure they're really super insulated and airtight. And then because humans need to breathe, there's continuous ventilation, bringing in fresh air, kicking out stale air. And though it's called passive house, it can be a single family house in the bottom left, that's in Wayland. It can be multifamily houses, which is what I'm going to talk about mostly today. That's Finch, Cambridge. But it could also be an office building, a factory. This is the world's largest passive house office building in downtown Boston. Next slide, please. I think the fastest way to see the difference a passive house makes is with a thermal imaging camera. Here's a street in New York. This is a real thermal image where warm colors show heat. This is on a winter night. And you don't get any points for guessing which one of these is the passive house. This has the same occupancy as all the other buildings around it, but you can see the people in the passive house are not paying to heat the street, which is what all their neighbors are doing. All their neighbors are spending money every night to just make the air in this cold street warmer. Next slide, please. And that's only one of the benefits. So first, it's cheaper to operate a passive house because the total energy use is on average 40 to 60% lower than a traditional building. It's also healthier to occupy because you're bringing in that fresh filtered air. You don't have the buildup of pollutants in the air. And if the air outside is polluted, we had the Canadian wildfires last summer bringing in polluted air, that doesn't get into your house because it's airtight and has to go through filters to get in. So you're breathing better inside. It's more comfortable because the temperatures are even, the heating systems are not loud, you don't have sort of drafty spots or really hot spots, there's less noise and odors because it's sealed so well. It's more resilient. So if you lose power in a traditional building, you have to leave within hours. That happened to a friend of mine, this blizzard that just happened. They had to just leave because they lost power. A passive house will remain at safe temperatures for 6 days or more, even without power, just because it's holding on to the heat. They're more durable because there's really thorough attention paid to where moisture can condense inside of the walls. And anyone who knows anything about buildings knows that mold is the building killer. That's the thing that destroys buildings from within. So inhibiting that mold growth is crucial for durability. And they're reliable because they're tested by independent third parties. It's not sort of a box ticking exercise where you can say, well, we put a lot of insulation in. Someone physically comes and tests. They put a big fan on the building and they test how airtight it is, how well it's going to perform. And if you don't pass, you're not a passive house. And that makes them attractive to developers because they know if I build this, I get the building I paid for. And the same is true for owners, buyers, renters. Everyone knows what's inside the walls is matching this standard. But that's all those things I just said are for owners, occupants, builders. But it's also better for everyone else. Even if you never set foot in a passive house, you should want these in your community. First, because lower energy use means lower emissions, so better for the climate. But also, even if you don't care about the climate, it's good for anyone who's paying electricity rates. And Becca talked about this a little, but I just want to dive in for a moment to explain this. We don't use the same amount of energy across the year. our electricity use really spikes when on really cold days and really hot days. And so there's a bunch of power plants and wires that we just use in a tiny sliver of the year. A quarter of our electrical capacity is used in less than 5% of the year. But we have to pay for it the year round to stay on standby. And that's a big driver in our bills. And our bills are going up partially because we need to build more capacity, more wires, just to meet that peak load. And so the thing that Passive House is really great at is that it's lowering dramatically by 75 to 90% the additional heating load. So you can build more giant apartment buildings to Passive House without driving up peak loads. And that's going to slow the growth of everybody's electrical bills. Next slide, please. Now, of course, all of this wouldn't matter if it cost the earth to do. Luckily, we've got some good studies on what it does cost. So the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center did a study. They tracked really closely in these 7 buildings how much it cost and compared to what they would have done in a traditional building. And they found for the kind of large multifamily buildings that are required by the specialized code, the cost premium was 2 to 3% on average. And that's partially just because if you build a big building, it's more efficient because each condo has fewer exterior walls than a single family home. And it's the enclosure, those really good walls, really good windows, that's the thing that adds cost in the Passive House. The thing that reduces cost, one of the big cost reductions, is that you just don't need as much HVAC. You can have much smaller heat pumps, AC, all that can be smaller because the building's so efficient. That increase is partially offset by these big mass save incentives you get. It's not totally offset by that, but then the part that isn't offset is paid off by the lower energy costs. So it's financially in the long term a great decision. And as has been mentioned, affordable housing is really well suited to Passive House, gets more points in the competitive process for getting tax credits. And also developers of affordable housing, they own it, they hold it, they pay the energy and maintenance costs usually. So it's really good for them. That's why it's so attractive. Next slide, please. You might also worry that specialized code is going to tank housing production. But we've done some analysis. We've looked using census data at new housing permits. That's the lower bar here. How many permits were issued in the year before the specialized code was adopted and the year after in the same communities. And so we looked at every community in Massachusetts that's adopted it. We've compared before and after. And what we found is the median change is a 15% increase in units permitted after adoption of the specialized code. Now there's no guarantee that every town's going to get that result. I think there's a lot of things that go into changing housing production. But if you're worried that, everyone who adopts the specialized code just sees their housing production go off a cliff, that's not what we've seen. We've seen, if anything, a mild increase. Next slide, please. And this is a great slide put together by Becca and DOER, which shows all the Passive House developments built or underway in the state. Those are all green dots. And what I really want to point out is the blue communities are the ones that have the specialized code. But you'll notice there are a lot of dots on here, big projects that are not in specialized code communities, which means people are doing it even when they're not required to. And all in all, more than 30,000 units of housing have started the process going through incentives from Mass Save. That's a huge amount of housing going through this process. Next slide, please. I also heard there was some concern about fire protection. Someone in Westborough had sent that to me, and about extra insulation causing issues. And passive houses are not, uniquely great for fire or uniquely bad. Passive houses need to meet the same fire protection standards as other buildings. Fire protection is a crucial issue. The worry about insulation, I think, is that some insulation types are flammable. All new houses, of course, need insulation. And there are lots of options that are not combustible. And actually a really common choice, a really popular choice in passive houses is this material you can see here, which looks like a goat hair, but it's actually called mineral wool. It's made from melted stone. And you can have that at 2,000 degrees for hours. It will not melt, it will not burn, it's just non-combustible, it'll just discolor. Next slide, please. I just want to conclude by saying that there's a lot of support for passive building. So if builders, architects in your community are kind of wary, it's worth knowing there's big incentives. They've already been mentioned. There's also free and subsidized training. So they can get certified training supported by Mass Save. And PH Mass, my organization, we will come and offer free training courses. We have free events, free videos to help support them. And I just want to finish with these quotations from some builders. The first one was some builders at a conference last year, and they said, since they started, they said, it's becoming more of the norm. We're starting to treat passive house not so different from any other project. And he explained that like the quality control that they were doing for their passive house projects, once they did them, they realized, actually, this is just good practice. We should be doing it for all of our work. So they brought that into the rest of their projects. And then someone I talked to this afternoon, I was asking them, this is a builder, if you had any issues, and she said, we're way past any issues with passive. This is something that is doable, it's achievable. It's really just about, for builders, quality control, which is something we want anyway. Next slide. Next slide, please. I'll just thank everyone for listening. I'll be here to answer questions after. And if you're interested in learning more about PH Mass, we're a nonprofit, you can visit phmass.org. Or if you want to reach out, my email's here. I'm alexander@phmass.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexander, and other speakers. Great job by all. I really thought you covered the issues well, and I appreciate your effort in putting this together. Lisa showed a map of communities that have adopted the specialized code, and I have another view of the same thing in a tabular view, which emphasizes that 3 of our Westborough benchmark communities have already adopted the specialized energy code. And it's important. Anyway, Ashland, Hopkinton, and Natick have all adopted the code, and others are working on it. I'm aware of about 8 other communities who are considering the specialized energy code at their Springtown meeting, and some of them are in attendance tonight, I believe. We do have some comments we received from other communities concerning their experience with the specialized code. Elaine Lazarus, the town manager at Hopkinton, commented that the specialized energy code is manageable and efficient, and they've had a very smooth transition for their designer. She's finding that it's a smooth transition for designers, building inspectors, and others. It is a transition, but it's gone smoothly for them. Mark Sandine from Lexington, talking about some of those affordable housing units, was commenting that although he heard a lot of concern at the beginning that opponents were saying, oh, it's going to cost too much, you're going to stop development, they have clearly found that's not the case, with an overwhelming increase actually in affordable housing being built. And Jillian Wilson Martin, Natick Sustainability Director, has said that they've not seen a change in the amount of new construction with the specialized energy code being effective, and buildings are just going for the all-electric option, which the code incentivizes. Passive house is a change, but it's not really significantly different amount of work than hers. And it's actually easier for inspectors than ASHRAE and Teddy, which are some of the other options in the stretch energy code. So people are not finding it to be a disadvantage, and they're quite happy with their decision to transition to the specialized energy code. So in summary, why are we doing this? It unlocks new sources of state grant money. This has been discussed earlier. Reduces harmful greenhouse gas emissions. In this code, in fact, tips the scales in favor of electricity over fossil fuel, which is a key tool for greenhouse gas reduction emissions. It's better for occupants, as you've heard, lower utility cost, healthier indoor living environment, and better quality new buildings with no impact on alterations, additions, and changes of use. So I will I had a note here. Open the floor for questions. Q&A, we can take questions from the room, or we can take questions online. And anybody in the room have a question? We have a microphone runner. You have the microphone? Yeah, when you're speaking in the room, you need to use the microphone, otherwise we won't hear you.
Hi, I have a question about, you mentioned new buildings and historical buildings, I thought was mentioned. But what about if there's an addition on an existing building, and so you have a blend of buildings? It's not historic, but it's an older building. How does this apply?
I can take that. If you're doing an addition, then you would just follow the stretch code guidelines. So
the new guidelines you would
no,
follow
so
those?
the specialized code would just apply to new construction, and an addition would kick you back to just following the stretch code, because it would be considered an addition to an existing building.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it grandfather so the older building part is grandfathered? Like,
So basically,
you don't have to update the whole thing?
So the stretch code is the sort of main component of the specialized code, and the specialized code is just 2 additional chapters on top of the stretch code, and those 2 chapters just apply to all new construction. And in addition, even though it's technically new construction, it is not classified as like new construction under the energy code. So you would follow the stretch code chapters and not the specialized code chapters.
Okay.
Yeah. So I imagine most residential projects in Westborough probably would not be affected by the specialized code, because most residential projects in this area are probably additions or alterations to an existing home.
I have a follow-up on that question. I've heard in some of our community meetings, and it involves ADUs. And I know an ADU is a totally different building and is covered by the specialized code. But what about if you build an ADU that's attached to your existing building? Is then that become an alteration or an addition?
That's a good question. So we are proposing some updates to the stretch code that should hopefully go out for public comment this spring. But currently, an ADU as part of an existing building, I do not think would be affected by the specialized code. If it's a separate standalone ADU, then it would be. But an ADU that's carved out of an existing house or attached to an existing house would follow the stretch code and not the specialized.
Another question in the room?
Sure. My name is Patrick Welch. I'm on the select board for Westborough, so thank you very much for coming today. Really appreciate the information and the sharing of your community's experiences with us. Pete just asked one of my questions, so thank you for that answer on ADUs. 2 questions for you. The first one is, I'm curious, we're entering into our town meeting in about a month or so. I'd like to understand from those that have already, I think one individual was from Lexington, what the experience was through town meeting, and if there's any, I'll say, issues or things that were brought up at town meeting that we should be aware of that might come up at our town meeting that we need to address.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I think what's going to be really important is to keep it very, very simple. And I think a lot of people in town and town meeting members, they're going to want to know, how does it affect them, right? How does potentially adopting the specialized code affect them? And we just had a lot of questions about it. I mean, I think you put a lot of people at ease by making very, very clear that this does not affect there is no change to any existing buildings, additions, historic buildings, ADUs, now that we just learned. So I think that's one key thing. I think what people also want to know is how it's going to affect the building department, the building commissioner, and the inspectors. It's going to put more work onto them. And what our experience has been on what we've seen from not just in Lexington, but a number of different communities that we've worked in, is that once the commissioners and the inspectors sort of realize what the specialized code is, the 4 very simple things that it adds on, that they realize that this is not adding any additional work for them. There's nothing, sometimes people get worried about hearing about passive house, so it's this new thing that they haven't experienced before. But as Alexander mentioned, they don't have to become experts in passive house because it's certified by a third party. So as long as they make sure that those third party certifications are valid, that's all they need to do. So I think that's another thing that not only sort of town meeting members, but maybe select board members or sort of other, committee members will be concerned about. And what we've seen is that hasn't been the case. Lisa, can you think of anything?
Sure. It's a great question, actually. I agree with Cindy, just keeping it as simple as possible. And we always like to get back to the fact that it's just 4 basic points that you have to remember. I think that's really, really critical. I had something else on my mind to say too, but I can't remember. But I think educating people in advance is a really great idea, not saving it all for town meeting. I know that you guys have an open town meeting, so that makes things a little bit more complicated. I also think that one thing is just to emphasize also the consumer protection. Is that me? Sorry, what consumer protection advantage of this, which is that, thanks, Cindy, sorry. The consumer protection advantage of adopting the specialized code. So I'm an architect, and we do a lot of renovations of existing buildings. And it's so difficult to do something as simple as run a wire to your stove, to replace your gas stove, to get a nice new induction stove that's not spewing harmful gases into your house. That just costs so much money. But at the point of new construction, when you've got a completely open structure and all you have to do is run a wire to potentially 4 locations, your heating system, your cooking, your domestic hot water, and your dryer, if indeed those appliances are not already all electric, it's cost virtually nothing. But then down the road, it protects residents from the cost and the considerable inconvenience of having to pull those wires and go to that extra cost. So I think that's just really important to emphasize that this protects future residents, basically, and that with doing all electric, there's really no additional requirements. And then doing mixed fuel, the additional requirements are basically protecting residents from these future costs.
And I'll just add that consumer protection applies to the passive house as well, because same thing with the wiring. If you're building a new building, adding an extra inch or 2 of insulation, putting in a fancier grade of window, that's the cheapest time to do it when you're doing it new. So it's consumer protection there as well.
Yeah, and also protection from basically the runaway costs of gas, because everybody's aware of the fact that gas rates are going higher and higher, that we have a very aging gas system. We're going to be paying higher and higher rates for our gas. So I just think building tighter envelopes, spending less money on your utility bills, that again is all consumer protection. So great point, Alexander.
Yeah, I have another question, but I'll just say one other comment after coming through this past major winter storm that we had and seeing the number of people with ice dams on their house. When you have an airtight home, ice dams are caused by poor insulation. So when you put these non-air penetrating insulation solutions into a home like icing and these other products, you're preventing that. So another benefit of it. My follow-up question is actually a separate question. I'd like to better understand if folks are aware of what is our state infrastructure, electrical grid. What is the state of that in regards to being able to support as a resident in the state? If we move everybody to electric, right? That's the goal here, is to get off of fossil fuels. as a layman to this, I would think that that would drive the electrical consumption, meaning the grid itself needs to support this. And I hear about issues with transformers now overloading because people are charging their vehicles at home overnight when transformers are supposed to cool at night traditionally. So I'm just curious if there's any information that could be shared around, is our electrical grid sufficient? And if it's not, are there plans by the state to improve our electric grid to support this?
Yeah, so I can address that. So part of the important response to that is that this is new construction. And so if we build homes that are just not drawing the loads or not requiring the loads from the grid that, say, an existing building would, if you take an existing building that's super leaky, terrible insulation, you make it all electric, that's going to demand a lot more energy from the grid than a new construction project, because we're reducing the heating and cooling load so much that the idea is that we're not going to break this grid by just drawing down what we're even requiring from it first. In terms of, I mean, there's ways around like EV charging, you know, there's managed charging, there's lots of work going on in that to try to reduce the load and also spread it out throughout the day. But the important thing about specialized code specifically is that we're just trying to make buildings that require less energy and then make them all electric. So new construction.
Yeah, that makes total sense in regards to reducing the energy load. But obviously, the town of Westborough in particular, we have a number of fairly large housing projects that are before us in the coming months and years. And you know, the concern is those were non-existing before, right? So those are net new, even though they're built in a passive house or a less, or I'll say a more energy efficient way. The concern is that that's an additional demand on the grid. So that's why I'm just curious about that piece of it. But you helped me better understand. So thank you.
Yeah.
I can also weigh in on this on the passive house side. So if those new housing units, right, you got these new projects that are coming into town, if you're thinking about the extra electrical demand that they will place, right, where's that extra demand coming during the peaks, right? That's when the grid is going to be under the most strain. And that's why it's so crucial to make sure that they're passive house buildings, because then their contribution to the peak load through heating is going to be 75 to 90% lower. There's also a great report out from DOER called Peak Potential that's out for comment right now that gets into this much more deeply if you're looking for resources.
And I just wanted to add all very, very good points that overall in ISO New England, our grid overall is still a summer peaking grid, right? So the grid as a whole is using the most energy, the peak amount of energy, still during the summer, and probably is going to be like that again for the next 10 years or so. So there may be cases where there may be certain cases within that network where that are sort of a little bit more constrained than others. But to Alexander's point, right, any development that you do, if you do it as passive house, you know, really efficiently, you're not sort of adding that much to the grid.
Well, and also, as one of Becca's slides showed earlier, just the new stretch code, which covers all new construction, the new thermal code of the stretch code is significantly reduces the load, because the requirements for doing a tight building enclosure are so much better than the old stretch code. So also, I will say that the state is very well aware that we need to increase capacity on the grid, and they've been working on this for, you know, a long time, and they're planning for more capacity. So this is obviously there's some local issues occasionally, but these would be issues no matter what kind of building gets added to, you know, a community. It's not sort of based on whether that building is all electric or not.
Thank you. Great points. That was very helpful.
Yeah, I'd add a point maybe from the Westborough perspective is I think we all agree we have a housing shortage. We need to build housing. And when we build housing, we're going to need utilities, electric, to service those new housing. So the question is, how do you minimize the amount of electricity you need to add for the housing we need to build to just support our residents and our children and grandchildren. So I don't think we should compare it to stop building new buildings. We need housing, we need other types of buildings. And when we build them, we should build the best we can, and that's what this code is about. Another question from the floor.
This is the topic that interests me to the grid, and thinking about the mixed use or mixed fuel housing that are electrified to, are wired to have all electric
In the future.
heating and everything in the future, but maybe they're new, but they're built with some other kinds of heat or something. What sort of requirements does that place on the grid for planning, for building the infrastructure, the grid, so that at any time that unit, whether it's apartments or whatever, can go online as all electric?
It's a very good question. But what you need to realize is that for like all electric heating, very efficient heat pumps, all electric heating, it's not going to really add that much more because you already are going to have air conditioning for that home, right? Usually, I mean, I don't know of a building built today that would be built without air conditioning. So it's really just very, very incremental from that perspective. Heat pump hot water heaters or solar hot water heaters, still, again, very little sort of addition to that. So it's not zero. It's not zero, but those concerns are pretty small from the sort of heating, hot water, cooking, and drying perspective. But a great question.
So I'd like to ask, Jeff has a question, go ahead.
You had said that it would be advantageous for Westborough to adopt the specialized code, in part because it is one of the steps towards getting the climate leader certification. There would be grants available to us. What would we use these grants for?
So we can use them for HVAC projects, for solar. We have, as some of you know, and let me speak to the climate leader application. There's 6 components of that. This is the 5th one we're trying to achieve. The 6th one is a decarbonization roadmap. And in that, there is a plan there's a method of how we decarbonize all of our municipal buildings, schools, town hall, this building we're in here today. And that's going to cost money. And as we approach the end of life of different HVAC systems, we should always try to understand what the all-electric option is. If there's extra cost associated with the all-electric, the Climate Leaders Program has significant grant money, both to study the feasibility of electrification of one of these existing buildings, as well as subsidizing the actual construction cost. And I'd like to offer a chance for Kelly Brown, who's on the call, to kind of elaborate on the climate leaders and what are other communities doing to invest in using the climate leader grant funds.
Yes, thanks, Pete. So similar to what you just said, for communities that are certified as a climate leader, they would be eligible for up to $1 million for an accelerated grant. In addition to that, and being able to design and come up with projects, we actually also offer $150,000 in technical assistance as well. So the opportunities for climate leaders are actually that $1,150,000. The types of projects that communities have come in so far, you've mentioned, are electrifying municipal buildings, adding solar photovoltaics to already electrified buildings, as well as those kind of projects.
And Pete, if I can add, the Climate Leaders Program, sort of gives money to sort of offset the capital costs, but what the town is going to experience then is lower operational costs as well. Whether it's, you know, from a more efficient sort of heating system, so lower utility costs, but also completely, you know, in the case of adding photovoltaics or solar, adding more solar, you're going to sort of erase a bunch of those costs. So it's not just what the Climate Leaders Program will sort of allow you to do is sort of offset your capital costs, but also lower your operational costs.
One question I've heard following up on that is, where does the money come from, Kelly? Is any of it federal money? Is it part of the Mass Save funds, or where does the climate leader money come from? And in these tight budget times, can the funds be cut or taken away from?
Yeah, so similar for Westborough's been a green community for multiple years, and the Green Communities program's been around since 2010. And there's similar funding sources for climate leaders as within the Green Communities program. So it's not tied to the state budget and it's not tied to federal funds. Currently, the pond that's out there for 60 million right now for climate leaders is alternative compliance payments. There is also funding that could go toward climate leaders in the future that would be RGGI, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a cap and trade, both separate, again, from federal or state funds, actually. And those two sources have been funding green communities as well since 2010.
Thank you. Another question from the floor?
I was just curious if the Mass Save rebates, if this becomes new code, if the Mass Save rebates then become available to all residents, even if you're not, you know what I mean?
You're not in a specialized
If
code
you're
building?
not in that specialized code building, do you still have access for, let's say, putting solar on your house or?
That's a really good question. So the Mass Save rebates are already available to you. The Mass Save rebates are not tied to specialized code or stretch code. One of the nice things about the Mass Save rebates, which is why we are constantly bringing them up, is that it really helps sweeten the passive house mandate. So you could already receive Mass Save rebates if your project qualified. It's more of the constant reminder that they're available there. And if you are doing a passive house project, you'd be a fool not to take advantage of them if you're in a Mass Save community. I am not, and I'm very sad about that. So, so they're separate from specialized and stretch code, but it's just a reminder that they are there and take advantage of them because you pay into them.
And very similar to that, to what we were talking about, climate leader, you know, grants for the town of Westborough. The Mass Save program, you know, if you have, this is sort of off topic, but I thought it was very sort of relevant, and it was a great question. You know, if you applied, if you wanted to upgrade your house with a heat pump, you can get your Mass Save rebates and lower your costs because there are new rates for lower electricity rates for homes that have the heat pumps. So it's a similar thing where you get help with capital costs, but also lower your ongoing costs.
Any questions in the chat, Lila? I have done different meetings around town, so I have questions that have come up. One that comes up frequently is the solar for residential. And if you have a wooded lot, we live in a relatively wooded area, are you required to cut down trees, or how is the amount of solar you expected to produce if you're in a shaded area?
Well, there are exceptions for shading, for sure. So I think if you had the case of you have a new building that you're constructing and the solar area on the roof of the building was shaded enough that you would get some exceptions and some sort of leeway on how much solar that you have to that you would have to install. So yeah, there's not a fight between, they're not going to make you cut down trees and shading. So yeah, that's a very good question, actually. So that's a small sort of little exception. And also, if you build any buildings passive house, that may still have like gas, hot water, so they wouldn't be technically an all-electric house. If you build to the passive house standard, there is not a solar requirement.
And just to build on that, passive house does not it's there, what you said, right? Passive house does not have to be all electric. I think most people do build them all electric. Many people do build them all electric. The exception is often the gas domestic hot water, but you're not required to do it.
You're not required, but if you want your Mass Save incentive money, you cannot have gas. So they all there. Yeah, Mass Save, the 3-year plan just came out, and if you have any gas connection, even if it's multifamily over a restaurant, if the restaurant has gas but multifamily above doesn't, it does not matter. If gas connects to that new building, then you're disqualified from the Mass Save incentives, which are $3,750 per unit, which add up. So we see many developers quickly decide that it's fine to have all electric cooking in their restaurant.
So electricity is already fairly expensive. It seems like it is in Massachusetts. Why does it make sense to encourage us to move towards more electric homes?
Well, if we're concerned about emissions, as one of my slides showed, you have a lot more emissions coming from gas heating now than you do from electric heat pumps now. And I think the hope is that with more renewable power, hopefully coming in the future, will bring the rates down. But that is a very good question, and many people are trying to solve the problem of electric rates.
But also, if you're reducing the demand through efficiency, through passive house, then you just need less energy, need less electricity. So you're insulated from whatever the rates are because you just need to use a lot less of it.
Right, and just to follow on that comment, again, for new construction, the stretch code actually already does significantly reduce demand because it's a much more rigorous code than we used to have. So one of those slides that Kelly showed was just the much reduced winter heating load that results from the stretch code right now for new construction. The other thing I will say too is that all electric heating and cooling is 2.5 to 4 times more efficient than the most efficient gas systems. So you're gaining on that efficiency as well by having equipment that is 2.5 to 4 times more efficient. So as you use your electricity, you're also gaining on efficiency.
And just to bring it back to we mentioned it a few times, this grid point, that bringing down the peak loads is going to reduce the future growth of electricity bills. So the more concerned people are about electricity bills, and it makes sense, I think we're all concerned about them, the more it makes sense to lower those peak loads, because that's a big driver of future electricity costs.
Yeah, and just to put a finer point on that, in the passive house is exceptionally good at that. And one of the tactics that the state is considering is load management and being able to load shed during peak times to shave it. In a passive house, you could turn your entire HVAC system off for 4 hours and you wouldn't probably even feel a degree change inside. It's very resilient to that, and it becomes an asset for the grid instead of a burden to the grid.
Thank you.
So I was really impressed by the slide that talked about, it was Lexington slide, and talked about the cost for the heating and cooling costs for the residents of that affordable housing being zero. That's a really important message. But it makes me want to ask a question around, has there been any analysis that could be shared in regards to, I think of gas products or petroleum products as BTUs. I think of electricity under therms. So I'm just curious, is there, as a residential property owner, as somebody who's maybe buying into a condo, whatever that might be in a large housing unit, what is the actual analysis? If I have 2,000 square foot space and I have traditional gas, right, versus all electric, what can I expect my bill difference to be to heat that to, call it 68 degrees, normal heating temperature all year long? Is there any data that's around that? Because I think it's really important to share with people, what can I expect as a consumer? Yes, all those other benefits of better air quality. Yes, if I'm hearing that the price will drop, but what is that actual cost savings?
Yeah, so I can just, I don't have it with me, but a colleague of mine, or current select board member, Mark Sandina, work very closely with in Lexington. He's actually put a sort of a graph together for, a typical, I don't think he has the size of house, but I think, if you're using gas and you use 900 therms for a winter, like this is how much it would cost you, and the equivalent sort of cost if you were to use, actually comparing propane. I mean, in the town of Lexington, I don't know how Westborough is, but in the town of Lexington, only about half the town is gas. And then there's 15 to 20% is actually still undelivered fuels like oil or propane. And then some of them are on sort of heat pumps or, electric. And he had sort of put together a chart comparing cost to heat with the same, sort of the same amount of heat, the same amount of demand for propane, for oil, for gas, and for, highly efficient, heat pumps. And for the last 2 years, it's definitely, heating with a high efficiency heat pump has definitely been cheaper than propane or oil. And it had been about the same, to gas prices. This is sort of Lexington's gas prices. Now that we have the heat pump rate for electricity, for heating with heat pumps are clearly the winner. And the difference is something for a winter of heating, if I'm remembering correctly, it's something on the order between electricity and gas is like a few hundred dollars. So it's not huge. It's much bigger for propane and oil, but it's significant. And if you think about if you sort of completely electrify your house and sort of get rid of your gas altogether, you're also saving at least $120 a year from just that main customer charge, right? From gas. So there's a big potential there for savings.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
And Cindy, it'd be nice, we can follow up and maybe you can share some of that data and I'll bring it back.
Just found the slide.
I
can show you. I just found the graphic that I can just show you after the meeting. Yeah.
We'll follow up with
Yeah.
that. That's good data. Well, I think we've kind of exhausted our questions. Lila, nobody on the phone? Last call for people on the phone. I see there's 11 people out there. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for participating, and it's been very informative and successful. I have a couple of promotional things. Our Environmental Action Fair is in a couple weeks, March 14th at the high school. You're all encouraged to attend, and you can learn more about that on the Sustainable Westborough website. And then finally, town meeting is March 21st. We'd like everybody to get out and vote. Hopefully you feel better, you understand the issues better and can support this issue. So thank you very much, and thank you for our volunteer who's been running the microphone, Talia. Thank you.